Hello YouTubers. This is the 15th video in our series of video around Blazor server-side, where we continue our discussion around building end-to-end enterprise-level Blazor applications, mainly targeting an open-source schooling system called OSSS for the financially disadvantaged students of the world. In the last episode, we talked a little bit about, how, we can submit. First of all, we upgraded to .NET 6, just a little reminder. So if we go back here to our series, we upgraded to .NET 6, and then before that, we talked a little bit about enabling, disabling controls into our systems. There is a list for those of you who want to follow the series from the beginning. If you go into my channel, go into the series, you will find all the way down here components enable, disable. So when you submit and you successfully submit, you basically lock the controls and you are able to go and say, well, this is the these are all the controls that I have, right? And then after that, we upgraded to .NET 6. And this is a very long series, about 15 hours of material. So, you can either watch it in double speed, or you can you can basically go through it and and hopefully you'll find it useful. Just a quick reminder here, just an end-to-end application, meaning that I have two systems, an independent API, which is OSSS core, which has a lot of contributions there. It has a lot of endpoints. There's almost 96 endpoints, right, that you can run and test all of them in less than a minute, right? 96 endpoints that just basic bare bones CRUD operations, for all the different entities that the engineering team, the open source, the good-hearted engineers, thought it would be useful for a schooling system to have these particular entities. And now we are moving into the orchestration side of this. The processing and orchestration side of this usually go hand in hand, when you start needing, a higher order business logic. So okay, this is the acceptance test. You run all of these, you can test all 96 endpoints in less than a minute, and this is actually hitting on the actual hardware. This is I/O intensive operation where you're not just mocking the external dependency. You own the external dependency, which is the database, and you're actually hitting that external dependency and getting feedback. So this is everything. It took about 44 seconds, 44.7 seconds, and 1455 unit tests. This one will be much faster. Should go in around a second if you're using the command line, and maybe a little bit longer if you're using UI. Yeah, about 14 seconds with the UI, about a second with the command line. Okay. So my API is in good shape. This is an API. Let me increase the screen font here real quick. I apologize for forgetting this. Sometimes I do forget this part. So here's 175. That should be good enough. Let's go back here, and here we go. Okay, perfect. So this is my API, and my API is running. It has an endpoint, and it's running perfectly fine. It's also running on .NET 6, and like I said, it has all the kinds of contributions and kind of API endpoints that we need. Now let's go back to the UI aspect of this. This is our UI. It's a little too large for the for the font size. So here's my UI, and we fill in a bunch of applications, bunch of information, then we submit that, and boom, all of a sudden you're ready to go. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what happens next. Okay, when you go and you submit a student like this, and you fill in the information, and you put in mail, and you said, this is whatever year it is, and you said submitting, and then it stops and says, okay, submit. Actually, I need to run my API. This one should fail. Yeah, perfect. This one is saying exactly the message we want our end user to say, hey, I have this student view dependency error occurred, contact support, and immediately you would know what that means. Let me run my API here real quick. Excuse me. Okay, so here's my API running, and then back to my UI. I'm gonna try and submit again, and submit it successful. Okay, this is not exactly a perfect experience, and like I said before, we're gonna go back and make sure that this looks really pretty, because experience, if I were to summarize UX for you, user experience, and UX, UI is completely different things, right? UX is how you design the flow of things. What are you really trying to guide your user to doing, versus UI, meaning you're targeting specific components that you need to design and all that. And we're baking both of these in. Usually they go hand in hand, because you can't have user experience without building UI components, And you can't build UI components without having a compass in mind to how to build that user experience. The thing about this piece here, though, is that just saying submitted successfully and stopping like this is problematic. Why is that problematic? Is because the controls are still sitting there, right? And whether you want to display the data that the user submitted or not, maybe it's a longer form or whatever the case may be, staying still like that is kind of problematic. So how, from a user experience standpoint, see, we're talking user experience here, how does that really work? Let's go back to the Blackboard here and let's talk about a couple of things. When you have a UI component, the first thing you want to have in mind is that whether you want to design this UI component, in our case here, that's student registration. You have this UI component right here, and you want to design this UI component in a way that is reusable, right? We are living in the age of micro front ends, right? Things can be plucked out of your existing experience and plugged into a different experience, and it just be functional, right? But since we're building this as an entire platform, as an entire portal, the situation here may be a little bit different. When you're done with submitting, some data through a UI component, you are faced with one of two options, right? You can either go into a different state and change the visuals on that component based on that state. I call it self-containing. So basically, this is basically a terminal state right here. So you go into a terminal state. What that basically means is that this here that we're displaying here is basically a terminal state, except that it's really bad from a visualization standpoint. Ideally, you'd show a picture of a guy smiling or something, and you're saying, hey, the submission has completed successfully, you're good to go. This is one part. So you could go into a state that says submitted successfully, I'm done here, there's nothing for me here to do other than just telling you that this is the case. That's the one part. Or you could move on to another component, or another page rather. So you're basically going here and you're saying, I want to go here and say, in my view here, I want to go here and say, different component. And I say different and not terminal for two specific reasons. Different could be you still have to fill in more details about the student, like their address, their contact information, their phone numbers, all of these things. This one is more realistic. Going that route this way is more realistic, but only realistic for particular scenarios. Going into a terminal state, if this is all that you want from your end user to just collect, that one piece of information, then you go and say done and done, this would make sense. Because we're building a schooling system, it's really expected, like if you go back into the actual model of the students that we're trying to build here, let's go back to the Solution Explorer here, and let's go to the models, and let's look at all these models. We have student contacts, so we need to collect their contacts. So this is student contact, which is connecting a student entity to a contact entity, right? And out of this contact entity, I want to go and say, well, this contact entity, right, has all kinds of things. What is the type of this contact? What's kind of information? What's the date? The type here is even more interesting. Like you go into the type, is it an email, phone, cell phone? You can add multiple sources of contact, right? Additionally, you need to have addresses. You need to have all kinds of different information that you want to have to be able to connect to a particular student, right? Well, if that's the case, then it's more likely from a data flow standpoint that you need to go from a data collection state to the next data collection state, because you're registering a student. You need to fill in all the kinds of information. It doesn't make sense to show, and this is UX speaking. I'm gonna put on my UX hat. It doesn't make sense that you go and say, hey, let me collect, their name, first name, middle name, last name, their gender, their date of birth, and that's it. Now you submitted an application. That's not realistic. There will be more things that we need to submit down the road. Now, going back to this state in here, going from one component to another component could be an orchestration between multiple components. Like you could have a bigger component in here that says, this is my UI component, And this UI component is only delegating the work to multiple other components. It goes from one component to another. So every time you go and say, this is the next state, so you're going from here to here to here, and based on the state of that component, remember how we talked about component states? We said there's loading, content, error. You can actually play around with that, and you say, well, there's loading state, okay, we're loading the component. Welcome to whatever, and then there's initial state. There is the, let's say, for instance, in here, this is the name collection state. And in here, there is maybe the contact collection state, collection component, sorry. State and component, right? Component. Right, and maybe the next one is, I don't know, maybe score collection, maybe previous, prerequisites, components. You need to fill in some details about whatever, right? So there's an orchestrator component, and this orchestrator component is navigating through different things. We're going to explore all these different options, like this upcoming 3 videos in this series. I am literally going to explore with you all 3 options, going from a UI component to a terminal state to a different component, actually more like a different route, like this, different route component, like this, or, the third one, which is to go, to have an orchestrator, and that component is switching between multiple components. You're going back and forth between multiple components based on the state. Well, each and every one of these components could have their own terminal state, but switching between components like these we will have to zoom out a little bit. And this is more of, a standard, like kind of architecture, because we orchestrate all the time, right? How are we going to orchestrate based on UI component? How are we going to control the complexity, when it comes to that particular route? Okay. So I'm going to start really, really simple with you. I'm just going to go and say, hey, I want to go to a different route. I just want to go to another page. And this other page will say the student has been submitted successfully. And that's it. That's all I want to do. How do we go about doing something like that? Well, first of all, let's go back to our UI here. So this is my portal code. And let's just go ahead and start talking about how we're going to navigate from one component to another. How can we navigate between 2 components? I hope the code is visible to you. This is a lot of code in here. It's a full-blown registration piece. And we will talk a little bit more about, how we can simplify things. We're using libraries like Syncfusion or Telerik or whatever is out there. Maybe some of these open source beautiful libraries that give you the nice kind of UI, accessibility and coherence kind of thing. Okay. In order for us to be able to actually navigate to places, we need something called a navigation manager. And this navigation manager in your Blazor application gets instantiated off the bat. Just like how you instantiate literally anything like logging broker, you say add logger and all that kind of stuff. So, as you may have thought, we probably need a broker in here. And we're going to build a little broker in here. I'm going to call it navigations. So that's my navigations. And internally, in my navigations, I want to go and say, here's my little interface. Let me hide the camera here. Oop. Okay, here's an interface, and I'm going to go and say iNavigation broker. Okay, so that's a navigation broker, and then I want the implementation of that sucker, so I'm going to go ahead and here and say navigation broker. And all that this guy is doing is just abstracting away existing implementation of the out-of-the-box navigation manager that comes in, because when you're writing tests, the last thing you really want to do is to try to instantiate, a native or third party. You want to instantiate your local components, right? So I'm going to go ahead in here. It's really a void, and it just say navigate to, right? And here's your route. That's all that it is. That's really all that it's doing, okay? And if I know how to spell string properly, you could probably have a... Here we go. Okay. String route. I don't know why I did it this way. Here we go. Okay, so this is my route. I don't need system in here. It's all good because this is a primitive type. I think we're fine. I wonder if it asks for the system. This is just for me to learn. I wonder if it asks for string. Oh, wow. Okay, so your alias Okay, interesting. Okay. Okay. So this is your primitive type string. Perfect. Let's go ahead and implement that guy. Very, very simple. So this is iNavigation broker. And I'm going to implement that guy. And I'm going to go ahead in here and say, I need a private class member. Private read-only navigation manager. That's our guy. And that guy will just come out of the box with the ASP.NET Core already instantiated, because that's how basically technically the system works. This whole navigation stuff that you're doing in your system, it's basically happening this way. Okay, so this is my navigation manager, and all I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead in here and just wrap that up and say this navigation manager is it navigate to? I think, yeah, and navigate to, there's to absolute URL, yeah, I think it's navigate to. Okay, perfect. And then navigate to route. Love the little UI experience that we have in here. It's beautiful. Okay, so here you go. That's your guy, and this is navigation, navigate to, perfect. I love it. Okay. Now, what are we going to do? We're going to take that guy and we're going to, I thought about this long and hard. I thought, how are we, does it make more sense to put the navigation broker on the component level and then mock it and then navigate to a different location, or does it belong more on the view service level? I thought about this a lot, and then, I thought to myself, okay, what are the principles that you really care about, when it comes to components? Okay, number one principle, I want to keep my component really, really dumb. I don't want it to do, any form of logic in any way, shape, or form. I want my view service to provide my component with all the things that it needs. So that means that if my component's sort of the controller for my view service, then it needs to only talk to one view service and that's it. So that means a view service probably needs to offer that kind of capability. And then I thought to myself, in addition to that, we probably want the view service to kind of handle all the little validations that are happening. So if your component is exposing a parameter, and that parameter basically says, okay, once that component is done, where do you want me to navigate to? It probably makes much more sense to have your validations and your mocking and your testing and all that good stuff living behind the scenes, right? You want these things living behind the scenes. So because it's a native component, we won't really need to handle much. We just need a validation piece, and we need a little teeny tiny service exception handling, right? And it's void, so it's not really doing anything more than that. So let's go ahead to our view service. So it makes more sense to put it in a view service. I tried this both ways, and I feel like my heart is settling on more the view service kind of thing. And I think this is where it really should live. If you think otherwise, please let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Okay, we have a lot of things going on here in this view service, but mostly these are not entity brokers. So I have two services in here, user service, and then we have two utility brokers that are in here. Okay. Well, if that's the case, let's go ahead and add another one, right? So under that, I'm going to just add another utility broker right under datetime in here, private read-only, iNavigation broker. So that's your navigation broker right here. And like I said, your view service is sort of an orchestrator, so it makes sense that it's combining the two of these services in here. And then everything else is just utility broker. Go back to our engineering standard, you'll understand that some brokers don't really convey any meaning when it comes to particular business entities. So having them around, it doesn't really add any particular complexity, especially when using them. So you use them once, you use the data, and you put it somewhere, and you move on with your own merry way. Okay, so what do I want to offer? I want to offer a navigation capability. So if I go into my the definition of my my view service here, I'm going to go ahead and offer this capability. I'm going to go ahead and say navigate to. I'm just going to offer that route in here. Okay, so my view service is offering the navigation capability to my component. Great, this is beautiful. Okay, let me go back here. That means I need to implement that guy, and it's going to go right under the public implementations. This is navigate to, and this is your route, like this, and we're going to go and say this is throw new not implemented exception. No magic going on here, just good old, test-driven development. Let's go down to my component in here in the services tests. Here it is. And I'm going to go back to my logic here, and I'm going to just say something really, really simple as here's a fact. Public void should navigate to route. So I need a route. And the good news is that, I know it's not really important because it's just a string and you're mocking your dependencies. But this is your due diligence. This is what distinguishes and differentiates a software craftsman from someone who's just doing a job, right? So what do I need? Why am I talking about this? The reason why I'm talking about this is that some people will go like this and say get random route or URL, and they will actually go the extra mile and say, well, what does Dynamics offer outside of the box that I can use? See, random URL right there. So I can actually create a random URL and pass that URL downstream, and it'll just work fine. What are the options on this guy while I'm at it? Looks like it has types, HTTP. Oh, I don't care about that. What else does it have? Domain names. Wow, beautiful library. It just gives you all that kind of power. So I'm just going to go ahead and say get value, and this value is going to be a string. So this is a random URL, and this is static because it doesn't really have anything related to anything. So we should be good. These are one-liners. They should stick together, and that's it. Okay. Get random route. This guy can be also static if we wanted to, and we could break it apart like this, and things would be nice. Okay. So get random route. You go back to your logic and you say, okay, here is string random route, right? And here's get random route. And in here will be input route. So this is from the random route area. And then I'm going to go set up my mock in here. So this is my, let's say, oh, I need to fix my test to actually support this new kind of dependency that I have. And I think I'm in the wrong service. I should be in the view service. Sorry about that. Let me take this, let me copy this guy and just revert everything in here. I still think this guy should be static, so let's put it as static. And let's break that guy apart. And things should be fine. Am I over 120? I'm not. It's just because I'm zooming in. My eye is playing that trick on me, saying maybe it's too long. Okay, and I'm going to revert that guy as well because we were writing in the wrong place. Undo changes. Let's go back here. And what I really need is my view service. Okay, right here. This is where I really want things to happen. And here we go. Private read-only mock. And this is iNavigation broker. That's my guy right here. Navigation broker mock. Okay, perfect. And let me go down here and say this dot navigation broker mock equal yada yada. Perfect, perfect. And then down here I want to go and say under datetime. Here's my navigation broker mock. This dot navigation broker mock dot object. Right, and I'm actually surprised it didn't ask me for, did I not set that up in the, oh, I didn't. Well, that's kind of important. Okay, let's go down here and say iNavigation broker. Navigation broker right here. And then let's assign this guy, this dot navigation broker equal navigation broker. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so now I have my dependencies set up properly. And then I have this guy happy as well. Perfect. Now let's slap in there the little get random route. There it is. Beautiful. And it won't fit in with any of these. Well, then since we're breaking it apart, I'll keep it broken apart like that. So just get random route right here. Okay, let's go to the logic and let's do some stuff. So in the logic, if you do Control-MO, it'll collapse things for you. And let's go up in here and say fact public void should navigate to route. There you go. Given when then. Perfect. And here is string random route. Right, that's the input route that I'm going to pass in. So just get random route. That's it. And then here's your input route. That's your random route. And I'm okay with saying like expected route for your I guess it's fine. Either way is okay here. I'm not really, I'm not going to be really too concerned with that. But let's just set up our mock here. So this is my navigation broker setup. So it's my broker.navigate to, and that would be my input route in here. And because of its primitive type, I don't have to worry about, kind of saying it's the same as. And actually, I don't have to return anything. So things are technically mocked by default. All I have to do is just go here and say this dot service student view service, and then navigate to, and that's my input route. That's it. It's a really simple operation that we're doing here that'll just take care of offering this kind of capability outside of the box. Some people might say, well, Hassan, are you going to have to implement this in every view service? And not every view service. It depends if you want to offer that navigation capability outside of the box for your component or not. Otherwise, you're going to have to handle the validation of the input route and all that kind of stuff, which it's not really the route I want to take in here. So the last thing I want to do is just validate that this navigation, because there's no return value really, right? So all I have to do is just verify that my broker has been called for this navigation with the input route times once, right? What else do I have to do? I want to verify that I haven't called any of the other dependencies, which is all of these other 4 in addition to the 5th one. So this is datetime mock, none of these has been called actually, except for the navigation broker mock, verify no other calls. Verify no other calls. If you put in the first letter of the method that you're calling, like if you do VNO, look, you can see it highlighting. If I do C even, it will highlight the first letter of every word. Thanks, Josh McCarr, for pointing me out to this kind of feature. I love it. Okay, do I have a failing test? Let's add this one here as well since we're at it. So since now we have a new dependency, and this dependency never gets called in here, but it will be the first one to get called in here. So let's run this guy. This guy should technically fail. There we go. There you go. So this guy failed. It says not implemented exception. Perfect. Let's go ahead in here and submit this guy and just say fail. So I have a failing test. And then let's go and make that test actually pass. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to go and say, here's a fat arrow. And I'm going to go and say this dot navigation broker dot navigate to route. That's all. That's all I have to do. Just offering a capability with my view service to maintain the purity and the really dumbness of my service. It's just dumb. It's just a dumb component that is not supposed to do any thinking on its own. It's just supposed to, call the view service, and the view service will say, oh, here's the capabilities that you want to offer. Okay. Think about your component, your UI component, as a renderer of data that's already computed and calculated and massaged for you. But also it doesn't do any particular actions on its own. It always delegates because its main responsibility is to render things, right? Render the view, render particular statuses. That's all it does. It just renders things based on statuses. So if there's an exception, it renders the exception. So if it wants to navigate, it needs to call something else so it can render that it's leaving the page and going somewhere else. Okay, so this test here is passed. Perfect. We have a passing test. Thank God, this is perfect. Now, the second thing that your component is not supposed to do, and this is what made me lean more towards keeping it on your view service, is that we need to verify. We need to go write a little test in here, a validation test in here that says, if the value is null, empty, or white space, we should be throwing a validation exception. Just does something as simple as that. So I'm going to steal one of these. Let's go and steal one of these, and I'm going to put it right here. And I'm going to go and say, wow, that's a lot of stuff. Let's throw all of that away. And I'm just going to go here and say, should throw validation exception on route or on navigate if route is invalid and log it async. Yeah, so if your component is offering this routing capability outside of the box, and it's saying whoever is consuming me should pass in the route downstream, it shouldn't be doing that kind of structural data validation. It's data validation. It shouldn't be doing that from a responsibility standpoint. So where is this validation supposed to live? Right here on this service. So this is my invalid route. There we go. And this guy is not really going to be a task void because there's no awaiting going on here. You're just navigating. And here's my world, given, when, then, and here's my expectations. Invalid student view exception, right? So that's the first one. Var invalid student view exception. New invalid student view exception with a parameter name, right? What's going to be our parameter name? The route, right? So this is the route. We don't have that in a particular parameter, so we're just going to have to hard code that one. And this is my invalid route right here. Okay, that's one exception. And then the second exception would be expected student view validation exception. Okay, new student view validation exception. And that guy will take the invalid student view exception right here. Ooh, okay, valid student view exception right there. Perfect. So I have these two exceptions that I expect to happen, which means I need an action in here because it's a void, so I can't really containerize it in a value task. And they navigate to a task kind of thing, or action. And this guy will call the service. Here's my service right here. This, there you go. This dot service. Come on, student view service. There it is, and it's navigate to, and whatever invalid route that I have. So I'm passing in that invalid route to this guy. I'm containerizing this in an action. The last thing I want to do is just assert throws, and I expect that student view validation exception to happen outside of this navigation to action. And we probably should make the T uppercase, or navigate to action. Yep. What else do I need to validate? I need to validate that my expected dependency, the subject of my test, which is this navigate broker mock, I want to verify specifically for this one. Some people ask me, said, why don't you just verify no other calls take care of that? And that's a good argument. The only problem is it's not really telling you the story, what was supposed to happen, right? What was supposed to happen. It's like, think of it as you're sitting with someone and you're telling them, if it wasn't for this validation, we would have navigated to this guy. Versus saying, oh, if it wasn't for this route validation, we wouldn't have done anything. I mean, both of them work. One of them is just more scientific and more specific than the other. That's all. So in here, I'm basically saying any string, really, should not have been called never on this particular mock. Nothing here should have been called on this mock, because of this validation error. And then you can put in there the rest of the validation things that you're doing. Since we're in this file, let's go ahead and just make sure that this is my navigation broker. Verify no other calls. That's my guy right here. Let's take all of this since I added this new capability, and let's just fix these while we're at it. So this is my new capability here, and that's my guy. There you go. And this guy as well. Okay. In my case here, it would be exactly these very same dependencies. The only difference is that, and I think I added a new line in here. Let's fix that real quick. There you go. Okay, let's go all the way to the bottom here, and let's just go and say none of these dependencies should have been called. The ones I really don't care about, including the one I have here, which is all the way up here. Okay, technically this guy should fail. Let's go ahead and run this guy, and let's see if that's really the case. All right, we have a failing test. Is it failing for the right reasons? Yep, it should say, so this test here technically should say something to the effect of, I expected that, there it is, should be 3 tests. and each one of them should say, I expected an exception to happen, but nothing really happened. There it is. It basically says, you know, I expected a validation, student validation exception to happen, but nothing was thrown, right? So let's take care of that. Let's go down here and say, okay, this is navigate to. We're going to use that little nice pattern that we have here to handle exceptions. So I'm going to go up here into my, let's see, because of this is Visual Studio 2020, I need to set up some configuration here for navigation, basically. So I need to say, you know, whatever there is a track active item in Solution Explorer. What that basically means, when I navigate something, I need to know where the solution is. Look, so wherever I go into any file, it basically tracks on the right side of the solution. All right, so I need an exception handling thing that's going on, and I also need a validation thing going on. So let's go ahead, let's start with this one, private delegate. This is void, really, it doesn't return anything, and this is, you know, returning nothing function. That's basically my delegate. And I'm going to go down here and say, well, let's do that try catch real quick. So private void try catch, and here's my returning nothing function right here. And here's try catch, and I'm just gonna since it's returning nothing, I'm just going to call the function here. And the exception that I need to handle here is invalid student view exception. That's the one I care about. Invalid student view exception. And I'm just going to throw here create and log a validation exception. Create and log validation exception. It's invalid student view exception. That's it. You know, because this is a native function, I don't really expect it to throw so many exceptions, maybe IO, whatever the case may be. And if that's the case, then it could pass my validation exceptions, and it may as well fall into the catch-all service exception. But for now, here's my try-catch function. Let's go back in here and just add this try-catch function right here. So I could just go and say try-catch. Here it is. I could wrap this guy up like this. You could also put the try-catch on the next line. That's fine for me too. So now I have try-catch wrapping this, but that's not good enough. Why is that? Because I actually need to do the validations, right? I actually do the little validations on my input, which is the route. So let's go back here. Let's do this and close, Control KD. I think we should be fine here. All right. Okay. Now I just need to validate the route. So validate route. So this validate route will basically go and say, you know, is this route valid? And if it's not valid, through a invalid student view exception. So I'm going to go down here and just go into, so this is validate student view. I'm just going to add another one in here, private static void validate route. Right? And then in here I say if, because there's nothing really, null or empty and all that. So if it's all included in here. It's all inclusive in this piece. So if this is my route here, then I can go here and say this is my route. And I'm going to go and say through. Oh, look at that. This is beautiful. It says invalid route exceptions because of it's trying to learn from my code, right? But you are in the student view exception, so it's going to be an invalid student view exception. And then my parameter name here will be route, and parameter value here will be the route that I passed in. Okay. Sounds like we have all the pieces in place. Now the exception will be thrown. If a route value goes in, an exception will be thrown, and then all of a sudden, the exception will be handled. Let's go back to our test here and run all. Love that little feature in here where you can find all your tests in place. Let's go back here, zoom out a little bit, and let's see if that's really the case. There we go. Here's our test. let's see, maybe we have a little error in here. Oh yeah, that's right. When I forgot something in my test. My test is broken because in here I should actually also verify that I logged that error. That's absolutely right. So this dot logging broker mock verify broker. See, that's beautiful. That's the beauty of unit testing. This is log error. It is the same exception as expected student view validation times once. That's absolutely right. Beautiful. Yeah, completely forgot about, this little piece. And I think we need some more closing brackets in here. There it is. Yeah, that's now we're functional. Let's fix our commit though. We need our commit history to still reflect that. So I'm just gonna go into the test here and say stage, and I say amend. And amending would basically give me that failing test first. Let me actually give me a second here. Let me commit that. Maybe I forgot to commit that at all. So this is fail. There it is. Okay, perfect. Now we get to go into the implementation. Now we should have a successful execution. Let's run this real quick. There you go. So now we're validating things are good and dandy. Let's go ahead and put that in here and say pass. Okay. One more thing for my validation, for my navigation piece. The last thing I want to do here is that I want to handle the generic service exception, right? So I'm going to go ahead in here real quick and type a fact public void should throw, that's a catch-all, right? Service exception on navigate if service error occurs and log it async. So all I'm going to do here is that basically to handle the catch-all situation. See, this is why you want to keep that in your view service, because that's where all your validation and exception handling is happening, and you probably want to keep this, in that realm. You don't want your component to do all that work. That just doesn't make any sense. Okay, so let's just create some route just to get things going. So get random route. So when I say some route, that basically means that I don't really care. Like the parameter that I'm passing in here doesn't change anything in any way, shape, or form. And then here's a service exception. New exception, like this. And then here's my expected var expected student view service exception. So this is new student view service exception. There you go. That takes in service exception as input parameter. So that's this guy. And then let's fake an injury, right? Let's fake an incident. So I'm just going to go here and say, out of this navigation broker mock, let's set it up in a way that whatever is being passed to it, I don't care what's being passed to it. It is any string, should eventually throw an exception, a service exception. That's this piece. All right, so we're faking an injury here. We're basically saying, hey, this should blow up, for whatever reason that happens in here. Okay, now let's containerize that action. So here's just like we did, navigate to action. So this dot service. Oops. This dot student view service dot navigate to, and this is my some route because I don't care, right? It's just a filler so I can get things running, right? And then under that, let's go ahead and say assert throws, right, student view service exception. This is what I expect to come out of this. And here's my navigate to action piece that I care about. Okay. What else? I want to verify that my broker has been called. Right, so this is my broker. Oops. Navigate to. I want to know that this guy was called at least with any string at least once. I really don't care which string. I just want to know that it has been called once with some string. Okay. What else do I want to verify? I want to verify that my logging broker, log error, it is like this, same exception as, and my expected student view service exception, and I expect this guy to has been called at least once. So an exception has happened, a service exception has happened, something happened outside of my navigation, my validation realm, and outside of what I expect this service to throw. There might be a lot of investigation about what are the native errors that could come out of this, sure. The last thing I want to do here is just cover up all the other exceptions. So all of these things here, pretty much the same, except for the navigation broker needs to happen first. So this dot navigation broker mock dot verify no other calls. Done. And while I'm at this file, let's go ahead and make sure that all of these guys also verify that there is no some magical dependency call is being happening in this level. So this is guy, it's good. Here we go. Control KD. Let's zoom back out just to make sure things are running as expected. All right, we have all of these in place. Perfect, 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 perfect. Okay, I should have a failing test now because I don't really have anything that handles that problem for me. Let's go here. And we have a failing test. And that failing test basically says, you know, well, that I expected you to throw student view service exception, but you really didn't catch all the exceptions that are supposed to happen there. Okay, let's commit that failing test. And let's make it pass. Passing it would be really, really easy, you guys. All I have to do is just go into the exceptions area and just go and say, give me that last piece of any piece of code I have. This last exception area here. I'm just going to throw it right here. No change to the original, and that's the beauty of abstracting away the exceptions from your system, is that your try-catch that's wrapping this call in here, this little try-catch that's wrapping this call here, is keeping you focused on the business logic. And if you really care about the other exceptions, by all means, go ahead. All power to you. Go ahead and do it. Okay, so that means if I do control minus here, I should navigate back to my service test, and that guy should technically pass. Here we go. And we have a passing test. Beautiful. Love it. Okay, now that we have navigation capabilities, here comes the tricky part. Let's go back to our view here. Now that I have navigation capabilities, I want when I submit the student, I don't want people to keep refreshing the page and submitting more information. I want to take them completely away from that component and put them in a different place. And there are always ways. There's also ways to do this when you are within the same component. Think of it as a single page application. You don't have to go to any different routes, you know, and it just knows how to handle that. Today we're just talking about this case. You know, you're submitting a student and it's taking you to a completely different route that's saying, hey, we're done here. You don't have to do anything else. Let's start with the test. So instead of going back, we're going to modify a test that we have here. Instead of going back and saying, hey, on should submit student, on successful submit, I don't know why this guy's failing. This guy should pass. I think it's from previous changes, but let's just give it a shot real quick and make sure that it's passing. Yeah, there it is. So on submit in here, it's basically saying, oh, go fill in all that information and then verify, right? Verify that all of these pieces of data are in there and that all of these guys are actually in disabled mode. I don't want to do that anymore. What I really want to do is that I want to go here and say, instead of all of this, all I really want to do is I'm going to take away all of this stuff, right? And I'm going to go say, just verify that your student view service mock, and this will happen after you verify the first call. So you submit it through the student view, but you also go and say verify that the service dot navigate to, right? Here's my expected route, and I'm gonna hard code this in here. This time we can't actually go and generate something random because I didn't consider this as an input parameter to the component, number one. But I also didn't consider this as this is something baked in for now. It's just baked in value that I want to pass in through to the component. So I'm just going to go ahead in here and say expected on submit route right? And that would be, let's just say /student submitted. That's the route that I want to go to. Student submitted. So I'm going to go here and say, I expect that this student submitted route to have happened, and verify that was only called once, and then verify no other calls have happened in that system. See what's happening here? Things are changing now, right? So instead of me saying, hey, submission successful, congratulations, instead I'm taking the person to a completely different route. And while I'm at it, let's just run this real quick in here. Here we go. And this guy is failing. Why is this guy failing? It says, I expected you to navigate on submit, but you didn't. What happened, right? I expected you to navigate, but you didn't navigate. So how is that going to work? Okay, let's submit this piece as failing. And let's go fix our actual code. So this is a failing test. Let's go back into our student registration component here. And this piece here, this piece that says report student submission succeeded, right? Instead, I'm going to go and say navigate to student submitted page. Just for now. We're going to change a lot of these things, right? Just for now. And I'm going to steal that page. Like instead of report student submission succeeded, I'm just going to go and say navigate. There you go. Navigate. And since we have two failed states in here, let's make this the happy case. So there's submitting case. Oh, no, this is actually right. So this is apply submitting and then submitted and then any possible exceptions that could happen. Okay. And in here, I'm just going to go and say this service. This is my view service right here. Navigate to /student submitted. That's the route I want to go to. And since this is a one-liner, I'm just going to go ahead in here and do this. And I'm going to hope that when that happened, when I click, it'll take me to that other page. But I don't have that page yet. Let's go ahead and put that page real quick in here. So in the pages area, I'm just going to create a new page in here. A page is just a component. A base component is a page. They're all the same thing. We're just, naming them differently, just how we name our classes so they make sense to us and we can maintain the system. So I'm going to go ahead in here and say student submitted. Like this. Just a normal Razor page. And in this guy, it will have at the top here, whatchamacallit, I think it's, if you go student, yeah, page, just page. And in here, I'm just going to say student submitted. Gotta love this new coloring thing that's happening in here. I'm just going to put a little label in here, says student submitted successfully. Later on, we're going to create our own components and, test all of that stuff. But for now, this is just me going and saying when the student is submitted, go to that page. All right. Okay. So what are we going to do now? What we're going to do now is that if I go run my test back in here, I need to go and run my test real quick. Let's go run the test here real quick. So all my tests should be passing. The exact same test that I was at for the submission. Let's go back here real quick. There it is. So it should submit student. According to this test, when I submit a student successfully, things will pass. Is that really true? I don't know. The test is saying it is true. So let's run this application again while we're running our API. I hope my API is still running. If it's not, it's okay. We'll run it. Yep, my API is still running and healthy and beautiful. What is going on here? Oh, it's saying some services are not. This is the beauty of testing things end to end. Just because your unit test is telling you it's passing, it's not an integration test or acceptance test. This guy basically in here is saying some services are not able to be constructed. So that basically means my startup CS is missing a new thing that I created that I forgot to register. And they're right. I created a monster. No, I created a navigation broker. Right? And I need to tell my registration that, oh, this navigation broker is actually a real thing. All right, let's run the world again. I can't wait to show you guys the acceptance test for Blazor applications. So okay, here's our hypothesis now. If I go and say ABC some ID and I go and fill in my information in here. If I go put in some 1985, shows you how old I am, and then go and submit, this guy should go to another page. There it is. Student submitted successfully. Win, right? Absolutely 100% functional platform that basically says, hey, I'm going to take you from this view to that view. Of course, the UI looks really terrible, and we're going to do that in in some upcoming series where I show you where we can actually make this actually a little bit more presentable than this. But you have to have the function before the form. Once you have the function, you can add the form, and now you have the function and form, and now you have a beautifully functional end-to-end application that people actually could use. Okay, is this enough? No, not really. That's not enough. Why? Because we forgot to handle one thing, right? Don't get too excited so fast. What happens if when you are navigating? Actually, no, I think we're fine because you're already wrapping this up. I was going to talk about the exceptions, but you already have that on submit. So this is great news, basically. Should render outer exception if dependency, and you go and say click OK. There it is on submit button, and we're already wrapping this up internally because we're not calling this externally. We're basically inside that exception handling realm. We're going and saying, hey, there's the navigation, and I couldn't navigate to a particular page. And I see no problem there in displaying the message. Like if your message is bad like this, the error that's going to come out, it's going to be something like, hey, I couldn't navigate to this particular... Actually, I should make it null. I just took it off like a JavaScript engineer. Let me take that out. Here. Route, null. There it is. Let me run this real quick. So in here, even if your data is correct, if you have a navigation error that's going on, it'll basically log an error and say this is not right. There it is. Refresh that real quick. Give me a second. This is date time. Oh, it couldn't handle the year 100,000 years in the future because I typed it really fast. But here, 1985. And submit. Look, advanced students said that, parameter value this. And it's really saying anything. It's just saying, I couldn't really handle this problem. The route is incorrect. Right? There will be a lot more that we gotta put in when it comes to handling routes, and making things pretty. But normally this is the overall view. And normally, if your structure, if it's trying to navigate to if you're offering a UI component as a micro UI component, and you're giving it to someone to use it on their page, and they're passing in the wrong routes, it's going to be their responsibility. The error that's going to come out is going to say, hey, this is not functional. This is broken, and we need to you need to fix your configurations. Anyway, so that's this guy. So I need to keep the startup.cs. I'm going to stage that guy, and I'm going to go and type in a task here that says config register navigation broker. So this one is good, and this one is just me messing around with the routes and saying, hey, routes are not working and all that kind of stuff. Okay, let me push all that code upstream. So you should have that code already in the GitHub repo for OSSS portal. I hope you really find this really interesting and useful to you. Let's test it one more time. One for the go. When you try to monkey around with the data and you're saying, oh, it worked before I monkeyed with the code and whatnot, test it one more time. Do your due diligence. It's gonna take you 5 minutes, might save you a lot. Let's go ahead and just test it one more time for fun. So here you go, 1985, submit. Boom. It's functional. Making it pretty, that's something else. Let's make it right. Let's make it work. Let's make it right, and then let's make it pretty. Let's combine that form and factor and brain and the bronze, everything together, and things should work. So going back into GitHub, if you go into just to verify with you, here's your OSSS portal. You should be able to see all of that good stuff that I just did today in your repository, step by step, very clean code. It shows you literally every single step of the way as we go. See, that's pretty much it. So that's all. I hope this series was useful for you. I hope this video was useful for you. In the next video, we'll talk a little bit about, switching within the same page, right? Your single page application, and you want to go to another component without actually leaving the page. Navigating to another page could be problematic because people could always go back and try to hack your system. We'll talk about all of these little things in this series. This series is going to go for a while, so I hope you can stick around. It's a very long series because there's so many different things I want to show you, and there are so many different things that to talk about when it comes to building end-to-end Blazor applications. I am very grateful for people who subscribe to my channel and people who comment, the likes, even the dislikes. People that say, well, I don't like this content, it's not really useful. It gives me that kind of feedback, and I couldn't be more appreciative of that. And this is how we all grow when our principles and our opinions clash, and this is where progress happens. I'd be concerned if everyone just agreed with everyone all the time. That'd be really, really a boring world that we live in. But at the end of the day, please, make sure, you look up the entire series. This is a very long series, and I'm very sorry about all the hours, that you have to go through, to kind of understand end to end. But this is really building production-ready applications. This is not just a demo to show you, how things work. It's actually more like real-life building applications that people are going to be using for the next 5 to 10 years. How are you going to build resilient systems like these that handle all kinds of different issues? So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in another video.